Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Ted. I've got some of my colleagues here.
Colleagues. Ryan.
Nate.
So today we're going to answer a viewer question. They want to know what books we read. So I know all of us have been in the books for quite a while. So who wants to go first? What's your favorite series, author, whatever?
Let's see. You have probably the amount of you've read as many hours of books as all of us combined, probably. So you want to go?
All right. So I've read, tons of Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, and then of course. Well, I'm going to throw this out there. It's a kind of a gimme, but I started with Tolkien. I think almost all of us probably started with Tolkien. In the
overwhelming majority, I'm sure.
In the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, which, although they're great books, I don't think they're great D&D books. They don't, those characters, there's not a lot of action. They spend more time running away.
Right.
So, I want to say, I was heavily influenced by Mickey Zucker-Riker with The Last of the Renshai and the Renshai Chronicles. Great, awesome books, which I believe you guys have read, at least Last of the Renshai.
Yeah.
And frankly, until 3rd edition came out, you couldn't even come close to making a Renshai. He still wasn't quite a Renshai, but at least you could try and pretend.
Renshai would be more like the prestige class to build up to.
Yeah.
Except, they start...
Supreme Cleave. So Renshai Chronicles, Last of the Renshai, awesome books. Mickey Zucker-Riker. Who wants to go next? And we can come back to me and I'll throw out some more.
Okay, I really like Patrick Ruffus, and he's done The Name of the Wind and A Wise Man's Fear so far. He's got a 3rd book coming out, and he's a unique author, I'd say, in the way that he does storytelling. He pretty much tells a story, and if you are expecting like a formulaic book, I don't really feel you get it with him. So if you like the formula and you want to complain about something where you're just like, well, he's describing how he's making a fire, that's kind of boring. But if you want to get involved and go along with a guy as he's telling his story, regardless of how strange or commonplace things that happen, then I think he's a good author to kind of get you into the tales of the person.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a series that I guess I turned you on to a way ago. Now it got turned into a little show called The Game of Thrones. You may have heard of this, maybe, but A Song of Fire and Ice. It was cool because it did this thing in fantasy where things don't always go the way of the hero. Actually, they often don't. Like, Martin is terrible to his character.
It sucks to be the hero.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be the character with, limited social mores because you tend to do the best out of anyone there. So for me, just, character development, even, the characters you kind of hate, you still begrudgingly respect because there's things in their past that kind of influence and inform who they are. There's a reasoning behind why Cersei Lannister is the kind of person that she is, or even Littlefinger to a little bit, but he's still kind of terrible. So, each of them, there's just no one is sort of this monolithic evil. It brings a high level of realism to a fantasy series.
Well, what really struck me about that series when I started reading it? And because I'm very much into kind of high fantasy, and there wasn't much in those books.
The first
at all.
book or two, there's barely anything fantastical
yeah,
other than the White Walkers happen.
But you know what? When they put it in there, those little pieces seem so much more profound.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely a good one to add to the list.
Sure.
I'll take it next, and I'll just jump right to my current favorite, which is Jim Butcher. And you guys have all read most of their stuff. He's got two popular series, working on a 3rd. And he's got the Dresden Files, which is a modern-day wizard detective. And if that's not enough sell, I'm sorry, but it's utterly fantastic. He's got already 15 books in that series.
It's a wizard with a listing in the phone book under wizard, which is pretty hilarious. It's pretty fantastic.
But I also don't want to undersell his other series, the Codex Alera. It's a 6-book series. It's I consider it, close to an epic. Although Jim Butcher says that it's not big enough to be his epic.
Mm-hmm.
He still has that dream of writing that someday. But it's a very, very fantasy system, very, very much a unique set of magic. Just awesome. Check him out. Back to you, Dave.
All right, I'm gonna go with. Although there's a lot of really great books, and this series, you might like it, you might not like it. The author did tons of stuff in Dragonlance. Richard Knack. I've always enjoyed his stuff, but I read Dragon Realms when I was probably in my teens. So as a reader and as a person, I was far less mature. Going back to it, it's not as good as I remembered it, but it heavily influenced me at that time. So, maybe, I consider it kind of like mental junk food. So maybe you guys will enjoy it, but there's definitely elements from those books that I've incorporated into my D&D campaigns.
There's a lot of compelling characters in that series.
And he does a lot of things that are just different and you haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were fun reads when I read them.
Yep.
I'm not big on going back and reading books, so that may color my my perspective as well.
Yeah, dude, there's just too many books out there. New books come out every year, so if you're going to spend the time to reread a book, time away from reading a new one.
Yeah, well, that's true, but I know some people like to go back and read them over and over again.
I cheat with audiobooks.
There you go.
I've listened to the last few Jim Butcher novels several times each. Because they're audiobooks. You just put them on whenever you want to do something else. That doesn't require a lot of brain power.
I'm a big culprit of the audiobook as well. I usually read the book in its print form, first time through, but the audiobooks I'll throw them while I'm working, while I'm doing stuff around the house. And I've listened to the Jim Butcher stuff and the Harry Potter stuff more times than I can count. Yeah, it's
enough
pretty
to make most of you vomit. So what's your next series or author, Nate?
I like R. Scott Baker.
Yep.
That's right. That guy. I had to look him up. I forgot his name. I didn't have the book in front of me. I did the Prince of Nothing and Thousandfold Thought. Really good in-depth thinking novel about one of the characters is very skilled at understanding people in how they act and how they interact with each other, and kind of like it's neat because it's kind of like a recognition of facial recognition and the thoughts that come before that.
So it's like a fantasy Sherlock Holmes?
In a way, but he's using it
people.
to... He's not using it to solve crimes. He's not using it to solve crimes at all.
He's like a nemesis character.
He's kind of like in a way he's kind of a nemesis. In a way there's a bigger nemesis. So he's...
Anti-hero.
Yeah. In a way it could be, anti-hero.
Yeah, cool.
But I really liked all the thought that went into the discussions that they have in the book about different actions and things that happen. So...
Yeah.
Makes it very believable that this guy has this level of understanding.
Yeah. So, I mean, outside of Tolkien, like, my early introduction into sort of genre stuff would have been R.A. Salvatore and,
we've all read that stuff.
Yeah. So, like, the Dark Elf stuff. I mean, as far as Drizzt goes, he's kind of one of the least interesting character from the cast of characters. Like, I would much rather read about Jarlaxle and Artemis Centauri because even in Disney films, I'm always more interested in the villains that they've created than the heroes anyway.
Not to diss Bob out there, but Drizzt I think has gotten to the point where he is so sorry I pronounce it wrong. It's just whatever. He's gotten to the point where his fan base is so high. I think RA is afraid to make any drastic changes because the fans are gonna revolt.
Well, also there's there's also the question of too with sort of the Mary Sue character, like the sort of like if the author were to have written himself into a series, Drizzt probably is RA,
possible.
And you make the character too good because, hey, it's your avatar for yourself in the world, Whereas, the other characters have way more flaws. They can actually be defeated, like this and that. Whereas you make Druid's like when the series like comes into being, he's already like too undefeatable. Like where does he really go from there?
Right.
Like,
Well, as good as the Crystal Shard is and the Dark Elf stuff is,
yeah.
if we're going to talk RA, we got to mention some of the other stuff.
The Crimson
too.
Shadow?
Oh, absolutely.
Crimson Shadow is freaking awesome.
You got the Crimson Shadow trilogy,
Spearwood.
Luthien Bedweir,
Yeah.
Wearing this magical cape that if he stands still for too long, it leaves this red mark behind him. I think it's one of his most fantastic series he's written.
Yeah, and colorful characters. I mean, RA does a lot of like sort of off-kilter characters. Oliver the
Burrows.
Yeah, a sort of swashbuckling halfling character who was pretty cool. Inigo Montoya sort of thing.
Yep.
Princess Bride for sure, happening with him. So that was a cool series.
And you've got the Spearwheeler's Tale, which takes a fellow by the name of Gary from modern day and thrusts him into the fantasy world,
to like a Fey world, yeah.
And it was a character in that series that really has driven our gaming group nuts, because I always love to try and make these bizarre names. And as I said in earlier videos, I was an elven player for a long time, so nods to Kelson Ellen Elvile Gil Ravagery was the character's name.
Wow,
That's ridiculous
kudos,
that you even remember
kudos
that.
for remembering the like 20 syllables of
Whatever, he's no Gino Hammer Thrower.
Yeah.
No. Gino Hammer Thrower, who could have the 7th hammer in the air before the first one strikes.
Yes.
So Spearwielder's Tale, and then also Echoes of the Fourth Magic, or Fifth Magic?
Fifth Magic.
Yeah, another good series, where it's basically, it's a very dystopian Tolkien-esque world, except for it's got a little bit of modern elements so like, I don't know, say much more than that like might be spoiling it.
Yeah. You just got to check it out.
Yeah. Right, but we can't leave off without talking about Corona.
Yeah, you got to mention the Demon Wars.
I think as far as RA's books, the Demon Wars is his best overall series. In my opinion, anyway. It has its own unique world, its own set of magic, and the course of the actual books. Not only does the timetables change, does the world change, but the actual like viewpoint. You've got some things that's the basic fantasy. You've got other books that are very political intrigue going on. You've got other things that are all about a war. It's just fantastically done.
It's good stuff. So moving on from there, what do you got, Ted, for another author?
Well, I mean, for me, where I started with books, with novels, it was just a bizarre chance. I was a comic book reader when I was in middle school, and I happened to be in the library at school one day, and I see this book on those round racks that spin, and it was called The Source of Magic. It had a guy with a sword fighting a dragon. There was a griffin in the background, and I'm like, this has got to be the best thing ever. I'm like 14 years old, and I've never really read novels, but it's Piers Anthony, the Xanth series. If you can't stand silly, you can't stand puns, run for your life. But if you like that kind of stuff, then this is the stuff for you.
So it's got like a bit of a young adult sort of feel to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely geared towards...
Let me tell you where he lost me. When the swords and boots started growing on the trees, I was done. I've read a couple of the books in that series. And
I started off with book 2, and you could pick up anywhere in the series because it's not one ongoing thing. It's all about just stuff that's in this world. There's a lot of recurring characters, and there's a lot of fun and interesting things. But I was so enamored with it, and for those who know me, I'm into jokes and puns and that kind of stuff. So it fit right in with me, and I loved it. It got me into reading, and then I stepped off from there, guided by your hand of here's an entire armada of books to read. So,
yeah.
What else do we got that is worth mentioning? My friends?
You know what? Although I haven't read a lot of books from this guy, I'd like to bring up Mel Odom.
Oh yeah.
Again, he did something that RA's kind of notable for, and that's casting characters against type with his seafaring paladin.
Right.
Which his characterizations were really good. that trilogy. Was it a trilogy or was it longer?
I think that was just a
Sahagins?
trilogy. I think that was just a trilogy.
The Sahagins?
Yeah.
It was a trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was a really great series. And then years later, he wrote another book based off of the Gamma World game put out by Watts. And, you know, up until recently, the Watts books that I've read I've not been very happy with. And I've not been inspired to buy a title from them, a novel from them in quite some time. But when I saw Mel Adam was writing for them, I was like, I gotta get this book. And it was really good. It was a great book. You know, it's,
And that's where when you see an author's name that you know and recognize, you know, it doesn't matter what else is going on. You just say, you know what, it's worth reading.
Well, I mean, he's a guy who's like, I believe he's written some Star Wars stuff and this and that.
Oh
He's all over the map.
He's done a lot of TV
but like,
stuff.
it's kind of like certain authors you can kind of expect a certain benchmark of quality. No matter what they're going to touch, they're going to do, you know, they're going to do better, do justice by it, or if not do better than most people that are going to handle that given thing.
Well, and for a long time, Watts was churning out really good writers like Richard Knack, Troy Denning.
Yeah, like 80s through like early through the early 2000s, like it was solid, and then it kind of
I don't, you know, Ed Greenwood's done some good writing for them. So, you know, I don't know what happened, because there was like this whole cartel of writers that would write for him, and then you see all these new names of writers that are untested, untried, you've seen before, and you know, I picked up a Dark Sun novel. I was so excited to get a new Dark Sun novel, and I read it, and I was like, oh my god, and I. You know, and I haven't bought a Watts book novel since.
Who was one of the guys that did like the 5-book series in Dark Sun?
Troy Denning.
Troy Denning. Yeah, Denning's another.
Cinnabar Shadows and
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
Well,
like
he did the full Pentat, right?
Yeah, the Prison Pentat.
Yeah.
That
Denning
is really
guy
good.
is a hardcore real writer, right?
Yeah.
Because that guy would pump out book after book after. He was a machine.
Yeah.
Yo, Butcher, you need to write like this guy writes.
Yeah, Denning and Denning.
So we can get our fill.
Denning was definitely somebody who's super qualitative too. Like, you know, the stuff. Well, I mean, like the original the Dark Sun stuff that was published in the 90s. All those novels were really solid. You know.
Yeah.
Weiss and Hickman.
Were they writing in Dark Sun? Or
No,
not Dark Sun, Dragonlance.
Dragonlance. Okay. Okay.
Did you say Dragonlance or you said Dark
Dark
Sun?
Sun. Dark
Yeah,
Sun.
I jumped campaign worlds.
Yeah. I mean, just like rather than getting too into specific authors, sometimes there's just like a campaign setting that I'm super into. You know, like so with Dark Sun, I read absolutely all of it.
The 13 old Dark Sun novels are just fantastic, and you know, one of the first things that you told me to pick up was Tribe of One, and I'm sorry I don't remember who wrote that one, but you know, that was just one of the best trilogies I've ever read.
Yeah.
It's just great from start to finish, and it apparently had enough following that they decided to, like, you know what, let's throw an extra book out there.
So it went from a trilogy to a quartet.
Well, it's not. It's a
standalone.
a trilogy and a standalone.
Okay, yeah.
I want to say it's Simon something or other, or something.
Simon
else.
Hawkins,
Simon Hawk, maybe.
something like that.
Yeah. Well, just look up Tribe of One. I'm certain you'll find it.
But yeah, those were some pretty sweet books.
But you know, we could also go into Stephen Brust or Brust, however you want to pronounce it. The Talco stuff.
I think that one's really important to mention in the sense that it really is a gangster book that just happens to take place in a fantastical setting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not they're not fantasy books. Really, it's kind of like medieval mafia.
So what's
magic?
What about all those dragon-like things that
They're not dragons. They're elves.
So what's the series? What's that series
The
called?
Taltos.
The Taltos. Okay.
You know, your main. Here's the other interesting part about it. Your main character is an assassin. How often do you have the good assassin as your main character?
Well, in the Hitman, the way they talk, they really talk like wise guys and stuff. It's very, you know, if you're looking for historical type dialogue, you're not going to get a lot of it. It's just weird because and they have the elves that aren't they call them something else, Targaryens. Targaryens, right? But don't they say they're elves?
Oh yeah, well I mean they look like elves. They're taller. They have the pointy ears, you know. And both races refer to themselves as humans. you know, or you know, people, whatever it is. So it's like you have to figure out who is actually talking to determine what they're actually saying.
Yeah, what their race is, and of course, like, you know, the real humans, like us humans, kind of live in the ghettos and they're the underclass, and they're kind of like nobodies.
Right. Yeah, and they have a you know, an interesting calendar and the whole nine. It's all built into what's going on. But I mean, there's also its own unique set of magic and the
Sets of magic.
Sets of magic, because you know, typically the Dragarians or elves have regular magic, and then the humans have sorcery. So they cast things by like witchcraft or
and it's more ritualistic.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very enriched series or world.
And again, the thing that really makes those books is the characterizations. Like,
Yeah.
the main character is so screwed up and so flawed. You just fall in love with him. And of course, in the end, it just so happens to be an assassin. And he just does like dumb shit to get himself in trouble, for lack of a better word. And
now
you got to read it. You can't really describe it.
No, the only negative part of this, you know, or it might just be a fact, you know, you might not have an issue with it, but the actual order in which the books are written, it's all over Taltos's timeline. It starts off in the middle and then bounces back and forth throughout the future. So you have, or for the future and the past, you have to try and figure out, you know, every time you open up a new book, it's like, all right, where is this in the timeline?
Wow.
So you're like, all right, well, at the end of this book, this just happened, which means I might have to wait 2 years to find out what happens next, because the next book might be further in the
So
past.
it's like a book novelization of Tarantino before Tarantino. Like,
Yeah. But honestly, after about 3 pages in, you're gonna forget that you're even wondering when it was happening.
Oh yeah,
It sucks you right in.
You figure it out right away, and it does. It pulls you in. It's a really, really fantastic series. I put Brust in my top 3. So
Nice.
Very cool.
Another one is Terry Goodkind, Wizard's First Rule and Sword of Truth series.
fantastic series.
Yeah, very good series. A little long read. There was a time during the book 7, I think, where they're in the desert, and I just put down the book. It's like, I can't read it anymore.
Well, I actually stumbled upon Wizard's First Rule because they did a TV series on it, and some people didn't really like the TV series, but when I got to the end of the episode and it says based on the novel, I was like, oh my god, I need to get this. And I really enjoyed the series.
I liked the actors in the series. I didn't like that I don't know, sometimes I just want to see the book in visual form.
Well, yes.
Not like every little thing, but when you change major stuff, you're like,
It was like when they tried to do a Dresden Files show.
Yeah, when you change the character's persona, I mean, to something that I don't like, it's going to be a major draw away from it.
Right, but, I mean, in this case, I like the series and I like the book series, as separate entities, but I didn't read the books first. I read the Dresden stuff first, watched the series, and I'm like, all right, well, they made some major changes there. But I was able to enjoy the Wizard's First Rule book as well as the Sword of Truth, series.
Not the same with the Dresden Files.
Not so much the same with the Dresden Files.
You watch it just for the fact, it's a televised version of Dresden Files, and that's the best I could say about it.
Yes, that's what it was, and I was supporting the Dresden Files and Jim Butcher by watching it.
The franchise.
The franchise.
Yeah.
That's as far as that one would go. But the Goodkind's books, they're quite fantastic. Yes, there's the desert scene. Haven't gotten that far yet, but what's there was pretty awesome.
Well, I hope you have the audiobook for that one, because it's a rough read to get through the desert. Another one is Orson Scott Card. Has a great series of books. He's the Ender's Game.
I think those numbers have gone a little bit higher since
the
movies come out.
Before the movie came out, it would definitely be something that you might not have heard of before I said it from your friends. And
Ender's Game has always been considered pretty high as far as like sci-fi stuff goes. Like,
But before the movie came out, I've had a number of people that kept saying, "Oh, you need to check this out. You need to check this out."
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you have a group of friends that everyone's a reader and they're all reading on their own times, there's always going to be a waiting list, so to speak.
You can't get to it all.
And you just can't. You can't. Until we're all wealthy people who can sit back and do nothing but read. Well, you gotta take the best you can.
or when you're like 80, 90 years old and you have nothing better to do with your time.
So, should we take this out with War of the Lance, maybe?
Go for it.
Well, and also too, we can do a little bit of Ravenloft, just a little bit.
You want to touch Ravenloft, then you can do Warlock.
Yeah, I mean, just like like Istrahd, Memoirs of the Vampire, like just that was really cool. The short stories collections. Ravenloft was cool because it's very kind of fantasy / Elizabethan horror. Sort of like if you talk
It's very gothic.
Yeah,
it's not
like,
Chainsaw Massacre horror.
Right, it's
Victorian horror, I believe.
right. Okay, yeah, by terminology, like it's a little bit of like like Anne Rice meets your contemporary.
I think Elaine Golden did a bit of the writing in Ravenloft.
Yeah.
Like she might have done Istrahd. She did. I know she wrote a couple of things in Ravenloft that I really enjoyed. I may be matching up the wrong book to the wrong author, but if you find her, you can't go wrong.
But yeah, it had like a little bit of some.
Oh, no, it's Christy Golden.
Okay.
I'm confusing Christy Golden and Elaine Cunningham, who wrote
merging.
merging, yeah.
Becoming one super author. But no, like it was it kind of had that sort of like some of the short story collection stuff had like a little bit of like a Tales from the Crypt thing, but not as hokey and like popcorn entertainment, but more it was like Anne Rice meets Tolkien type of thing. Yeah, it's really cool stuff. So
Knight of the Black Rose.
Knight of the Black Rose, yeah, Soth. You can't go wrong with Lord Soth. Yeah.
So yeah, there was definitely tons of good books in there. That's another one I probably read most of the Ravenloft series. Even they went into more of a modern vein with some of that stuff. It was very less D&D-ish, and it was more Victorian, and even that stuff was really good, and I really enjoyed it. It's just the way they tell those stories, and I do like the off-scene, not the splatterhouse kind of horror, that gothic feel. Like when you read one of those books, like you're not sure that it's going to turn out okay.
It's like an Edgar Allan Poe story in a way, but with like fantasy dressing to it.
So yeah, that's definitely very good inspirational writing that your players probably will not thank you for reading.
Yeah. Right.
And then I guess a lot of us kind of got started with War of the Lance with the Dragonlance stuff. Hickman and Weiss, they wrote so much in Dragonlance, and Dragonlance was really the biggest TSR at the time, I guess, Dungeons and Dragons style campaign world that was written in, before Forgotten Realms came along and kind of took over.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like, like Tolkien was like the first, adventuring party sort of story. And then like the Dragonlance stuff was like come along so many tens of years later, and like the Dragonlance stuff was just like another like green wet behind the ears green adventurers starting their careers and like seeing them go through their whole progression, their arc.
And yeah, it felt really fresh for the time too.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So there's our list. I hope you've been taking notes to write down and go figure out what we even said.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we're probably gonna have to show note this one.
If you have any questions or you want a little bit more information, feel free to put the information in the comments, and we will gladly respond. I know everyone here is an avid book reader. Myself, I'm a banner waver for whoever I'm currently favoring, so I'll gladly answer any questions you got.
And perhaps we'll put an Amazon list down below for you guys, so you can see what we've read and what we like.
Yeah, that's right. And anything you happen to purchase, full disclosure, will go toward helping us out as Nerdarchy. So we'd greatly appreciate it, and it's not going to cost you anything extra. You just click the link, and you can get some great books. Help you, help us, win-win. So.
And with that, you can find us on Facebook, nerdarchy.com, Twitter, and all those other good places.
And Pinterest, Instagram. Yep.
Till next time, stay
Stay
nerdy.
nerdy.